Thank you for joining the February 18th, 2020 VOLTA call. Just a reminder to everyone that our meetings are public and recorded, and we do post them to YouTube once the meeting concludes. So please keep that in mind with anything you're sharing during presentations and during the discussions today. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first topic we have today is Matt's going to do a demo related to MIB templates. And then we have another agenda item that was not on the original email sent out yesterday, and Zach's going to cover that. Then we'll go into review of any non-Brigade related JIRAs after those first two items. So with that, let me just check, are there any other topics the group would specifically like added onto the agenda today? Okay, not hearing any. Let's go ahead, Matt. I'll let you get started. Let me stop sharing my screen, and then you should be able to start sharing yours, I believe.
Okay, give me a second. Okay.
All right, we can see your screen.
Wonderful. Okay. So, and pardon my voice if it comes and goes. A few weeks ago, possibly during this meeting, possibly during the Scalability Brigade meeting, we started to kind of go over the notion of MIB templating. And I'll save folks who've already seen it the redo of this presentation here. But really the goal here, again, is with MIB templating, it'll save the hundreds of iterations required to discover ONU hardware capabilities. This MIB upload next sequence, typically, depending on the capabilities of the hardware in the ONU, can take many seconds. And most of the time in various PON networks at various operators, the ONUs that are deployed are known. They're not surprises. They're not added on a whim. So knowing that, one, the ONUs we will deploy are known and typically tested ahead of time, and two, that they are usually the same hardware and typically have the same capability set, we could go ahead and skip ahead possibly with some of the ONU discovery and jump right into actually provisioning. If anyone hasn't seen these designs, they're in the VOLTHA Google Drive under Design Docs, OMCI ONU Adapter. There's a few other bits and pieces in here. There's an actual Word doc, and then there's actual presentation if you want to kind of go through some details. But what I was going to do here was actually go through an iteration of running the templates, actually an iteration without running the templates, and then another iteration with running the templates. It kind of gives you an idea of some of the differences. So to start, I should already have my environment running, and well, CTL adapter list, we should have current adapters. Also, I have my OLT hardware running, and this OLT happens to have 3 ONUs plugged in, 2 Nokias and an Alpha. The part of the reason for the testing of variety is, one, we want to be able to make sure the templates work with many different ONUs, and two, obviously, different ONUs have different capabilities and might take longer depending on their capabilities. So this one kind of gives a good demonstration of a few different kinds. So with that, everything's running. The adapters are running. I'm going to go ahead and add our device. And this time, in this first iteration, I'm not adding the template. So this is where I'm really trying to demonstrate kind of the before and the after. So we're going to add it, device enable, CTO device list. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of flip through as it's going. And you'll see here, they all started the starting open OMCI step. This really just means it's going through MIB discovery. It's actually walking the MIB for these 3 ONUs. And as you can see, they've slowly started coming along. The Alpha came along, and then now the 2 Nokias have come along. And then they've progressed into the next steps. OMCI flows pushed. So this is a run without the templating. Now, it seems like it was pretty fast, but again, this really starts to show itself when you have hundreds of these ONUs and they're all the same, right? So this time, I'm going to run the same thing again, but loading the templates. The templates right now are loaded into etcd directly. At some point, they may be provisioned similar to tech profiles are for various operator configurations. There's a JSON-based file. It gets loaded into etcd at some point before you want to provision the service, and then you start provisioning the service. These templates would load in much the same way. So give me a minute while I restart everything. So it should be coming back up. Now it'll take a minute, obviously, for the OLT to get ready, but hopefully they'll both be ready about the same time. All right. Yep. All right. So the adapters are ready. OLT is still starting, but while the OLT is starting, I'll go ahead and load the templates. The loading of the templates right now, there's a directory that's checked in the OpenONU repository at the top level called templates. Again, like I said, this isn't the place to actually store the templates for all your ONUs. It's just right now, it's the best, easiest place for us to be able to share it with folks. Ideally, they would be tracked in another place. They would be part of some environment configuration. They would be deployed through some northbound API into etcd, just like the tech profiles. But for now, the easiest way to show this off is to just have this script loaded as part of the repository. Real quick, each of these templates here are loaded into etcd in a particular key location. This key location is built by synthesizing the vendor ID of the ONU, the equipment ID that the ONU advertises. This is kind of a manufacturer's hardware ID, if you will, and then the software version for the active software. So based on these three things, so far in all the ONUs we've been able to test, this is enough to get a pretty high level of comfort that the template we're loading will match the hardware if these three items are a match. So part of the template loading process is to actually, before starting to load the template or look it up, it's query the ONU for these three values. If these three values are collected and this key is looked up in etcd and it matches, then we have a template and we can go ahead and load the entire template. So I'm going to...
So Matt, if there's a software upgrade, even though there's the OMCI doesn't have any change, but because the software version number has changed, so this template will need to be changed?
As it is right now, yes. At this point, we haven't run with enough different ONUs to know whether the software version really matters. I was kind of conservative on this just because if different software versions decide to change the numberings of MEs in a certain way or any number of other kind of configurations, the last thing we'd want would be for an old template applied to a newer configuration and then something is missed. But again, as time goes on and folks use this, if we determine that enough identifying material is in just the vendor ID and the equipment ID, this key could just be that. It doesn't have to include the software ID.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, this is Chip. Well, I've actually seen software features and MIB reset values change as new software is downloaded. So I think keeping the software version is a wise idea, especially to start with.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. And kind of as a demonstration of that, for the two Nokias I happen to have different software loads on both of them. So here, same hardware, but different software version. And then for what it's worth, I've got a couple of alphas in here as well. Kind of an interesting scenario is the one alpha that I have that has the same equipment ID, but runs the Veep-based uni, which has the the TR69 management interface, it actually shows the same hardware vendor ID and the same hardware ID, but it has a different software load for presumably doing the Veep work. So again, it was one of those situations where, you know, the hardware physically looks very different, right? The Veep capable ONU actually can do Wi-Fi, but from a OMCI point of view, it was the same equipment ID, the same chip that's presented in OMCI. So again, some of this may be kind of going through a discovery process about your own hardware. From a timing point of view, I would consider this part of kind of your lab acceptance testing of new ONU. You would go through this process in the lab, you'd figure out what's going on, you'd run it obviously without a template, figure out what the template should be, figure out what the software version you'd like would be, and then you kind of set it by the creation of this template. Also, I have a BBSIM template here as well. This one is really, really good for the load testing we're doing with the Scalability Brigade. We're running up hundreds of ONUs, all being the same ONU. This really shows itself quite well over there. Before I load these, actually, well, I can go ahead and load them, doesn't matter. So all I did here is just load them all into etcd, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up one of them just so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. The format here is the JSON-based format of the MIB as it's stored in OpenOMCI. Again, this format is used internally for a lot of different functions for ONU MIB instances as well, both JSONifying and de-JSONifying it into the in-memory structure. So it seemed like it was a natural fit for the template because it was already in a format that was in use by the library, the MIB dictionary anyway. The difference here really being there's these new attributes at the top level that define the template name, which also happens to be the key path in etcd. And then when the template was created, I felt that was convenient. And also a version, if you need to version it so that you decide at one point you had something configured wrong, you need a new version, you can. But everything else in the template is 99.9% as discovered through an OMCI walk or a MIB walk during a discovery, with the exception of a few places where we actually have these replacement values where we need to replace the unique parts of the ONU's MIB on discovery. The template is loaded, these tokens are searched for in the actual template and replaced with the actual, in this case, serial number of the ONU, and there's also, we're not using it yet, but there's also for the layer 3 managed entities, there's a MAC address. So this is also replaced as well. After this is done, this instance is now unique to that ONU and can be loaded. Go ahead.
Matt, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Would there be interest and or the possibility to generating these doing runtime? Meaning, if we see an ONU that we don't have a template for, could we automatically generate this?
It could be. Right now, the creation process is manual, mostly because we're not storing the MIBs yet for every ONU instance in storage. But once that happens, hopefully very soon, you'll be able to use etcd to pull out an instance of an ONU's MIB and swap out the unique pieces. So basically replace the serial number and the MAC address with a token value and then store a new template. Certainly possible. For a first pass in implementation, it did not do this, mostly because we wanted to get it out there so folks could start using it. The other piece too as well is as we start using these templates, we may discover an auto creation of a template may not be desirable in some cases. We may want to vet those a bit more before automatically adding them. I kind of go back to an operator's kind of test and accept lab iteration where you bring in a new ONU and you might want to kind of explore some of its capabilities. You may want to go through that process first before creating a template. But again, it could be automated just in time, or it could be automated with ease of introduction after this lab test and accept as well. There's nothing stopping that.
Makes sense. Thanks.
So anyway, as you can see, and I'm just going to scroll through this for illustrative purposes, for this particular ONU, you'll see there's lots of priority queues, and they're all the same, right? This is really what we're saving. Every single time we do a MIB upload for this ONU and this type, every single one of these is iterated over every single time. So again, the savings here is just look at the template and you can see what we're saving.
From a template perspective, if there is something like that that's repetitive, have you thought adding kind of a loop type syntax or something, so that rather than have to repeat the block 5 billion times or however many it is, you know, repeat it once with some sort of count?
Well, so we say without templates, we're kind of beholden to OMCI and its prescribed way of looping over a MIB. So, you know, without templates, you're forced into saying, oh, and the ONU told me there are 300 things you need to go get, and you start with 1, and you keep going until 300, and that's it. With templates, given everything that's in here has been already been learned, we're not actually iterating on this anymore. We're loading it all up once, and the only things we're asking the ONU now are the 3 unique pieces of information we need to look up the template to begin with.
I miscommunicated my idea. I wasn't talking about iteration or communication back and forth between the ONU. I'm talking about the source of the template. You've got this repetitive block, right? That you could say, hey, just repeat this block, right? You know, these identical blocks with.
Yeah.
To shorten the template, to shorten the template itself, you then generate from the template the full JSON and use it. That's what I was kind of hinting at, if there's any value in that at all.
I think so. Again, I feel like once folks kind of start using it, some of these ideas may materialize on their own. But yeah, I didn't want to get too presumptuous with some of this, mostly because there are differences, right? This particular one, they have different instance IDs and different some of them have the same tcomp pointers, and then some of them have their own, right? So there's the nature of how the hardware is arranged decides some of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, it's algorithmic, right? It's deterministic, again, based on the vendor ID, the equipment ID, and the software. But in a first pass, I didn't want to get too clever.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, and I'd suggest keeping it that way, because I actually used an auto-generated kind of template a long time ago with OMCI, and just the speed up factor, at least for a developer, is significant. So yeah, I'd burn the extra repetitive space. it's small.
Yeah, well, and again, running BBSim with 200 ONUs, you really begin to see it. It really shows itself. So anyway, now that the templates are loaded, I loaded it in etcd. They're the ones in this directory here. I'm going to go ahead and now run through the same thing again. My ONU is started, I've stalled long enough. Yep, he's happy. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing again. And so I have a couple of scripts here that make this easy, so pardon me. 91. All right, run the same thing again, this time with templates. 5 seconds after the enable. We'll see how far we are. Uh-oh. Demo gods have struck me down. Of course. All right, let me do this again. I don't know what happened here, but we will rerun it. Strangely, we did not get any indications. Something has happened. Let me shut it down again. All right, I'll restart it and try again. All right, load the templates again. Wait for OLT, there's OLT. All right, and hardware is back, so let's try this again. Hopefully we won't have this happen again. Oh, son of a... All right. Let me try one more thing. This will be the last time. If it doesn't work this time, then you'll just have to trust me. And I'll figure out what's going on.
Looks like you've done this once or twice before.
I've done this thousands of times. Come on, come on. Here we go. Okay. All right, coming up again. I went back one revision on OpenOLT. There are some changes that have come in recently that I'm not sure if it's affecting this or not, but gonna just see. All right, loaded the templates again. Everybody's up, everybody's happy. Indications are coming in. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 6, 91, 91. All right. God almighty. All right. So I don't know what the issue is. I will have to figure this out, why I'm not getting any of my indications anymore. Oh, you know what? I know why. I put in the wrong IP. I suffer from too many OLTs in my environment. So you guys got to watch me stumble around. I was trying to provision 206 and it was actually 208 where I was running everything. So, oops. All right, one more time. So while you're at it, you get to see how quickly you can iterate with this style setup. If you're ever curious why I'm still using Compose, this is why.
So Matt, one question. If we have to create a template for a new type of ONU, are there any documented steps of how to go about that?
Not yet. I plan on doing that soon. Right now, the process is cumbersome, mostly because MIB instances are not stored in etcd yet. When the MIB instances for any one ONU are finally stored in etcd, the process will become much more streamlined. But right now, as it is, part of the step in discovering an ONU, either after loading the template or after walking the MIB, is the entire MIB is pretty printed into the log in debug log mode. So you can pull this out of the log if you need to. Right now, there's no other way to get to it. There's no northbound API to tell it to dump the MIB. There's no hook into this other than just pulling it out of the log. But again, that's not the final version of this. The final version of this should be pull an instance out of etcd, modify it, and then load it to the key path of the template.
So on the process point of view, could this, like template be part of like responsibility of the supplier or vendors? When they have a new software release, they should also provide this template as part of the software release.
It would be really nice, yes. If we had that kind of buy-in from all of our vendors, it would be fantastic.
And I keep thinking is, with the template idea and pre-build the templates, has that have any overlap with the problem-informed VOMCI framework?
I don't know, honestly. I haven't looked enough at it to see. I do know that these problems have to be solved regardless, right? Wherever you're running your OMCI, right, the spec G984, G988 go through this sequence. So everyone is kind of having to deal with one way or another. You know, whether or not it's left on hardware to deal with, i.e. it's left closer to the OLT to deal with, or if that's virtualized and extracted out and put northbound on the network. I think with the BBF proposal, they plan on doing something very similar. You still got to solve the same problems, right? You still got to be compliant to the spec. You still got to walk the MIB. You still have to kind of go through these iterations. So I would think there's some, you know, potential there for, you know, not solving the same problem multiple times, I guess. But again, without having looked at that in detail, I can't really say.
As I said, I was wondering whether instead of, I mean, the common part could be, you know, how using that framework to build the templates instead of, you know.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, again, the MIB format itself, right? It's modeling like modeling is. So it's not like, you know, this modeling would be any different from anybody else's. You still got to model the managed entities and the various values and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, sure, I guess so.
Someone should look into that. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, so this time I'm running it again, loaded the templates. I'm going to provision the correct OLT this time. So we'll see what happens this time. All right, here we go. All right, oh, there they are, good. All right, it's 5 seconds. And yep, they're already ready. Look at that, they're already ready to go. So you'll notice that you didn't even see the starting open OMCI. It moved straight into Discovery MIB Sync Complete, and some of them even already moved into initial MIB download. Discovery MIB Sync Complete is the signification that the MIB has been learned, whether through template or MIB upload next, either way. The difference here now is, you know, I waited a few seconds and then, you know, checked, whereas before there was a few iterations of checking through this, most notably the ones that had the more hardware capabilities took a little bit longer, and this time they were ready to go pretty much right away. And then, yeah, you're good to go at that point. So, yeah, and there we can go ahead and just look here and make sure they all eat. Users. Yep, and again, the one that has an RG plugged into it is authenticated. That's basically it. Like I said, there was kind of some talk about, where did I put it? The template design. In the design document here, if you want to kind of go through it in written word detail, there's some good notes in here as well, just regarding OMCI in general. But at the very bottom, the just-in-time creation of a template, yes, I think that's a good idea. I think we could probably do that as we kind of start using this. And the only other thing I wanted to point out too is the behavior, if there is no template, is do exactly like it is today. Went through that earlier. The same code without loading the template worked like it's always worked all along, but with loading the template, the MIB sync state machine in OpenOMCI now has a check that will jump ahead depending on whether there's a template. And that's about it. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's probably one other speed up you could do that would help is there's the capabilities section of OMCI where you pull up the managed entity, the 2 tables in there, and those aren't typically, you know, MIB upload doesn't do table capabilities. So if you were able to cache the value of the OMCI ME, the 2 tables there for the message types and managed entities, that'll save you from 5 to 12 round trips.
Yes, correct. Yes.
So that's a good future thing, but this is a huge, you'll find it's a huge performance hit or improvement. Yep.
Yeah, the capabilities one, some of these, as we start getting into the more interesting features of different ONUs, OMCI, some ONUs are better about like capabilities, for example, or supported MEs than others. There's some where they fully let you know everything that they can do, and then there are some that I've found that they don't. as we start moving along with this project, I feel we'll have to get more involvement with different ONU manufacturers to really kind of flesh out some of these corner cases. Examples maybe being capabilities learning. Others may be like Ethernet link ports, Unilink port state I've found in recent testing. We can't rely on that anymore to know whether the Uni's up. Again, it's a side issue to the templating, but my point really is as we start really exercising open OMCI and different ONUs, OMCI stacks, the conversation is going to have to be both-sided. We're going to have to look at open OMCI and where it needs to change, and we'll have to look at ONU's vendor OMCI implementation and make sure that all the pieces are there to interwork in a larger community-based project. Any other questions? And with that, I'm done.
Okay,
back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks. And Zach, I think you're next. Did you have any material you want to present, or?
Yeah, let me share my
Okay,
screen.
I'll let you grab that. Thanks.
Alrighty. Okay, so this is really a heads up for everyone. ONF is changing how we handle our contributor license agreements, which are the legal arrangements that we use to make sure that everyone has correctly licensed source code, and we can do things like relicense and make sure people don't have patent disputes and that sort of stuff about that. So historically, we had this separated into a bunch of different agreements. You would come to Garrett here, and there'd be an agreement screen, and the only option would be individual, which doesn't really work for corporate or institutional agreements, but everyone was signing this because Garrett only allowed this. So as ONF grew and we ended up getting more projects and some people using GitHub and some projects using Garrett, and this not being exactly legally right, we decided to implement a new CLA system. So we have done that, and that is going to, we already have it enabled over in ONOS. If you check in code to ONOS right now with Garrett or on the micro ONOS project, you'll be sent through and have be asked to sign a new CLA. The new CLA, if once you go to the page, it will prompt you for an email address and then send you a login link, and then you end up here. And this is a page to sign a CLA. You can sign it as an individual, but I think most of the people involved in court, at least, will probably need to have an employer or institutional CLA. And once you get to this page, you can have different agreements. You can be asked if you are allowed to legally sign something, and if not, you can have somebody else sign on your behalf and then add your credentials, mainly your email address, and if you are using one of the GitHub projects, a GitHub ID. So for example, I signed an agreement here. It shows me the agreement that was signed, and you have identities. This is a GitHub identity. I would, if I need to submit things to OpenCourt Garrett, I would go and add, I think, so let's say Zach Garrett, and this is, and add the identity and sign the addendum, and then it shows up here. And then when I check in code to Garrett, it will say that I have a CLA signed. It actually will skip past this, just your standard repo upload or Git review will pass through. And if you haven't signed it, it will send you a link to sign up this CLA. So what this means for this community is that you may need to talk to your boss or whoever has legal rights to sign a corporate CLA and to go through that process. We're working out documentation with Ein and a few of the other DevRel people about how to present that. And we're going to enable this, but not have it be enforcing. So you'll get the message that you need to sign a CLA, but it won't prevent you from actually checking in code. Sometime this week, that's going to happen. The switch to this being an enforcing mode will be probably beginning of next month.
Are there any rights changes in this that are
I don't
significant?
believe so. The actual text of this, there's an individual and a corporate one. I think the corporate one has a little bit of wording change, but it's all the standard stuff. It's a license grant. It's that saying that you wrote it, and that and those sorts of things. I don't believe there's a I'd have to talk to the lawyers about that, but really it's very similar to the previous agreement, which is, you can see here. So just know that this sort of administrative change is coming down the pipe. You're probably going to have to deal with it in the next week or so. And if there are any questions about that, I can definitely either answer them or pass them on.
It'll take more than a week for any corporate legal department to do this.
Yeah, we're actually thinking that it'll probably be maybe beginning of next month before we get to this. And if there are extenuating circumstances like that, those can definitely be brought up as to when we do the enforcement switch. So that's all I have. Are there any questions about this? Okay. Thank you, Julie.
All right. Thank you, Zach. And let me bring my screen back up. Okay, the next topic we had was looking at any non-brigade related JIRAs in this range, and I'll check to see if anything came in since we started the call. So 2579 through 2621. Most of them did appear brigade related. I did want to take a look, let's see. I don't have a brigade identified yet for this one from Mahir. Add new extractors to utilities Python. So that one I thought I would bring up here. I think I saw Mahir on the bridge also.
Yes, sure. These are helper functions to extract some parameters from the flows. So I will use these functions in OpenONU adapter for the new paths. So it's straightforward thing, right?
Thank you, Mahir. Any questions from the group? Okay, I'm going to hit refresh to see if anything else has come in since we started. It looks like 2621 is still the latest one. We do have a number of IGMP related things have come in, a number related to scale and performance as well. Those are all part of Brigade, so I don't think we need to discuss them on this call. And 25, let me scroll down a little further. So again, starting from 2579, I believe these are, other than what we just talked about, these are all Brigade related. So before we move on, are there any specific JIRAs that the group would like to look at with this larger group today? I did not see any flagged on the all discussed, but since we do have a number of new issues, just give folks a chance to speak up if they see anything while we have everyone on the bridge today. Okay, I am not hearing any, and so again, no items flagged for all discuss. Remember, you can use that if you would like to flag something for discussion with the larger group. And moving back to the agenda, I think that takes us through our agenda for today. I didn't add it on the agenda here, but just a reminder to everyone about the potential face-to-face VOLTA meeting and the poll that Saurav had set up. Saurav, is there a close date for that poll?
Not quite, but what I think we have already settled on some dates, and we are planning a preliminary agenda. So expect to hear something from me in the next couple of days, and we'll put the agenda up on a Google Doc and let people comment on it, and we'll revise it as it goes along. But we will definitely give the final dates so people can start making plans.
Very good. Thank you, Sarov. And thanks everyone who did participate in that poll to help with the planning for the face-to-face meeting. So appreciate everyone's help there. That's it for the topics we have on today's agenda. So I think we'll go ahead and give everyone a little bit of time back. And Matt, thanks for the demo. Zach, thank you for introducing everyone to the changes coming for CLA. And I'm sure if people run into questions as they encounter the new CLA, Zach, can they reach out to you directly for those questions?
Sure, and we'll also inform the community as when that goes into enforcing mode. There will be some announcements on listservs and whatnot.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks everyone. And I think we'll go ahead and drop the bridge today. I'll stop the recording. Thanks everyone, and we will talk again soon.